Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make apple pies. But the first thing I'm going to show you is how to set up your area. So, first step is you want to put foil on your area because it's such a mess cleaning it up from your countertop. So we start with that. The next thing you want to do is put parchment paper down because you're going to roll your dough out on here, right? So parchment paper is, you can do this. Parchment paper, nonstick, okay? The other thing you want to do is line a baking sheet with foil and parchment paper as well. You'll change this out, you'll see. The next thing you're going to need are more than likely gloves because you're not wanting to make your hands all a mess. I suggest using a good pair of scissors. It's disinfected, clean, everything else to cut your dough. You want to get an apple core to help decor your apples. You want to make sure you have a decent sized knife to cut your apples. You want to make sure you have a paring, well, this is a paring tool to peel your apples, or a peeler. Not paring, but peeler. Depending on how many pies you plan on making, you need a decent size mixing bowl. Okay. Now you also need a cutting board. I use bamboo. And if you're using bamboo, you should always treat it with food grade mineral oil. You can get, I got this from Amazon.com. You need a cup measuring tool to measure out your flour. I'll show that to you in a bit. Depending on how many pies you plan on making, you should have a towel to put your apple pie pan with the apple pie when it's finished on the towel so it can cool down. You should have at least one set of washing gloves, and I'll explain that a little later why. Sometimes pies can run over, so you want something to grab it, but let me show you something else. You should have a good pair of oven mitts as well. You should have a pie pan as well. And of course, you can go to Walmart or some other places. And this is lard. We're going to be using that. Okay. I'm not going to open up these bags at the moment. You're going to be using what I call Rome apples. You can see what they look like, but it also says Rome there, but if you don't see the sticker, you can get an idea. I use between 8 to 10 Rome apples in my pies. Of course, I use the silicone, well, I don't know if you call this silicone, it's pretty rough. I use this type of rolling pin for a reason. It's easy sliding. Of course, you need ground cinnamon. And you're also going to use nutmeg, ground nutmeg. This is a teaspoon. You're going to be using a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. You'll see that in a bit. And if you don't know how much a pinch is, they actually sell these pinch measuring tool. That's for the nutmeg. Other thing I recommend is 2 to 2.5 gallon bags. You're going to use this to do your apple mixture. Another thing I suggest is using some type of mat on the floor to help keep a mess down to a minimum, but it's also comfortable for your feet. This is a bath mat, and they can be washed. The other thing you need is your brown sugar. Now, another thing I tend to use, because you can either use this or something else, But when you grease your pans, you're either going to use butter, or I use bacon drippings. This is actually from, this is bacon grease from bacon I baked. And I use it to grease the pans. I also keep it refrigerated. So the first thing you want to do is prepare your area. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Another thing you really should have, and you'll understand this in a bit. So here's the mixing bowl for your brown sugar, cinnamon, and everything. This is what I call a flour bowl, and this is a water bowl. So I'm going to put in I let this, you'll understand a bit too. 3 heaping cups of flour, right? Now, after that, you want to get your flour bowl filled up like that. Put it to the side. Zip this back up. Okay. Ooh, this is kind of heavy. I normally keep it in here. Okay. Now, kind of funny. So, I use gloves quite often, as you can tell. So we got that. Now, the next thing we're going to grab is lard. Now, if you can't tell a pound, this is really simple. I'll teach you something. Okay, so you know your sticks of butter, right? Okay, now, if you read it, and this is how you can remember, so you figure one of these things is 1 pound, right? And you need 1 pound of lard. So, you take, see how it says 8 tablespoons is half a cup, right? You have 4 of these. Half a cup times 4 is, you have 1 cup, 2 cups, 2 cups of lard. Okay, if you can't remember that, just remember to look at your sticks, or you can buy this in 1 pound, or you can buy this in the big containers, like this. Refrigeration's not required, but you know, you don't want this sitting out all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for a moment, and you'll see me pausing throughout, just so I can get this stuff in here. By the way, I do use an apron, because I just got one. It does get super messy. So you can see the lard is in here, and I just throw a certain amount of water, and then I'm going to start kneading this. You can add flour as needed. So I'm going to pause it for a moment, and then I'll show you the consistency. Okay, now what I'm going to say here is you split the dough in 2. Okay, one is for the upper crust and one is for the lower crust. You're going to put a little flour down on your parchment paper. Okay, hold this in a ball. I'm having to do this one-handed since I don't have a cam man. Okay. Then a bowl. I'm going to basically, just like that, and you're going to roll it out. So next thing we're going to do is grease the pan, and you know, this helps the slices to come out a little easier. So, you know, it's not that hard to do. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to take that grease pan, we're going to put it upside down, and you're going to kind of flip it over, and then I'll show you how to work it. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is trim around the edges, and then after you trim around the edges, you're going to smooth it out with filtered water, and I'll show you the finished product in a moment. Okay, so this is what it looks like smoothed out. If you have too much excess water, you can always take a clean napkin and wipe it out. There's your water. Now, you're going to set this to the side. You're going to roll out the other half of the dough the same way, and we're going to move on to apples. And as you can see, I put foil on a cutting board so I can use both sides of the cutting board. So hold on, and I'll show you how to make the filling. Okay, so give me a minute. Okay, so you're going to take 1 to 1.5 cups of brown sugar, 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, and a pinch of nutmeg, and you're going to make sure you mix it up really, really well, right? And then, in case people don't know how to do this, I can't do this one-handed, so I'm just going to explain it to you. So you take this apple, right? These are Rome. I only use Rome. And take the apple core, run it through the top to decore it. Then you're going to peel the red off the apple. You're going to get out any exterior seeds, and then you're going to cut it. Okay, so I'll show you that, and then you're going to put the apple slices. This is like shake and bake. You put the apple slices in the bag, and after you're done getting the apple slice cut, you're going to put this in the bag and do what I call shake and bake. I'll show you in a moment. Okay, these are approximately what your apple slices should look like. You don't want them too thin. You don't want them too thick. Okay. You can do any amount, but you can do 6 as a minimum, although your pie will look small. I like to do 8 to 10. I'm very liberal with my apple pies, and people love a lot of apples. So, yeah, I'll show you the mix in a bit. Okay, as you can see, I have all the apples peeled, not filled. Now I'm going to put this in the bag, and I'm going to shake and bake it. So if you don't understand what shake and bake it is, it's basically mixing around. It's a lot easier than using a mixing bowl. Okay, so the next thing we do, we go and get our pie pan that's prepared, just like this. And we're going to put the mix in, and then we're going to put the top on top, and then I'll show you how I design it. I'll show you in a moment. Keep one thing in mind. The more apples you put in here, the more coverage you're going to need. Now, you trim it around with the scissors just like I showed you. So the next thing you're going to do is wet it down with water, and you're going to create what I call a moat around here. I'll show you in a moment. Okay, see how I smooth the edges? Okay, and I kind of just did that. Okay, next thing you do, take a little filtered water, and you start to go like this the whole way around. Okay. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is put foil underneath after you clear it up. You're going to kind of hold it like so on each side. This helps with dripping in the oven or on the pan. You can design this top any way you like. I use some sugar, and I'm going to push this thing back a little bit. There we go. The way we're going to do it. The reason I do this is it gives it a bit of glaze. Okay, and what we're going to do You're going to make a north, south, east, and west. And then carve out a hole in the middle. The next part, go like, see how I'm crisscrossing them? Okay, this is what you want to do the whole way through the pie. This is also now about the time that you want to preheat your oven. You wouldn't have wanted to preheat it beforehand, so you put it at 400, whatever your oven is, and once it gets to 400, it's going to vary. Some people put their pies in for the 30 minutes at 400. My first 40 minutes I do at 400, and then you do, after that, 325 degrees for an additional 45 minutes. But we'll go through this right now. We're just doing 400 degrees for 40 minutes. Keep an eye on your pie. For you, it could be 30. You're just going to have to figure out what works for you. For me, it works 40, and I'll show you why in a bit. Okay, so when you're done, it should look something like this. You can, my hands are clean, you can throw a little more sugar on there to give it more glaze. And that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. And I'm not going to say the companies, but I'm going to say there are some companies out there where I've seen employees not wash their hands and cross-contamination and the whole 9 yards. I've worked in food service in the past in a number of places, and cross-contamination was a big thing. You either wear gloves and change them out. If you touch your head, you touch your, not to sound funny, you touch your butt, you touch utensil to food, that's and like raw meat to cooked meat, that's all cross-contamination. Something that's very important. You don't want to do that. If you're touching your hair and touching your face and touching your butt and scratching yourself and all that happy stuff, you should wash your hands thoroughly for at least 20 seconds in hot running water. Not where you're going to get burned hot running water, but hot running water nonetheless. Either that or constantly change your gloves. We do not want, and that's another thing I should add here too, you should wear a hairnet if you have hair. You should not be scratching your butt while you're cooking. I'm not going to even get into that. People sometimes do that and don't realize they did it. I've seen that stuff, and I don't appreciate it when someone's making food for me. I'm very careful in every sense of the word. And I don't do to people what I wouldn't want done to me. So anytime I make food for someone, especially like a pie, something special like this, I make sure I'm constantly washing my hands and using gloves. And if you can't do that, then don't make it at all. I don't care if I'm not in the food industry at the moment or not, making it at home or making it in the food industry. You should remain sanitary, the same way you need to cook your food properly as well. So I'm still waiting for the oven to heat up. I'm actually going to go ahead and start working on the next pie, and that's another thing I wanted to add in. If you're making several pies, you can wash out the Ziploc bag and dry it and reuse it rather than using 3, 4, 5, 6 Ziploc bags. You know, take a break now and then as you need. Okay, so now we're putting this in the oven. You want to make sure it's in the center rack, and you're only going to cook one or bake one pie at a time. So what I like to do, I like to put a timer for 40 minutes and that way I don't forget the pies in the oven and how long it baked. But for the first 40 minutes it will bake at 400. We'll be right back shortly. The pie is not done yet, but I want you to see how it's looking. You see, it's baking really nice, and you don't want to open the oven too many times. So I'll see you in about 18 or so minutes. Now, when you knead your dough, you don't use a kitty to knead your dough. Sorry folks, I had to add this in here because it's just so cute. And I know everyone loves kitties. So here's your midterm entertainment here. This is a happy kitty. Make sure when you knead your dough, you knead it pretty well, that you get all those bumps out of your dough. Okay folks, so now the timer's going off. You need to reset the oven now to 325 degrees. And then what you're going to do is set the timer for another 45 minutes. Okay, so this is going to bake. This is looking really nice so far. You can see the brown on it. So for another 45 minutes it's going to cook at 325 degrees. Okay, so this is a finished pie, as you can tell. Sometimes it'll drizzle. You can change things out. But pretty much, I mean, this is what it looks like. Very nice pie. And well done. So there's my version of homemade apple pie. Hope you enjoy the recipe.